Today you'll be starting your first project called Illuminated Initial. Illuminated meaning decorated, and initial, you are using the first initial of your first name or first initial of your last name for the project. And that initial is going to be the emphasis of the project, meaning what the viewer notices the most should be that letter. And there's 3 different reasons why the viewer will notice that letter. First is because of size. It's going to be the largest thing on the page. Second is because of texture. Now, the texture of the paper is always going to stay the same. It's going to be smooth, but I will show you some colored pencil techniques so that you can create a texture on your letter to make it look like what it would possibly feel like if you could actually touch the texture of that letter. So size, texture, and last is color, so that it's different than your background. Your letter will be noticed the most on the page as well. Today you're going to do some drawing, and no colored pencil yet. Colored pencil will happen next week, and I'm going to walk you through how to complete the drawing for today. On your table, you each have a reference page, so you can take one of those reference pages and look at it while I walk us through the drawing portion of your project. When the time comes to actually start working on your paper, which you're not going to do just yet, you'll do this when I'm done with the video, the first thing you're going to do is label your paper. And you want to label it with your name, your teacher's name, so look on your table folder and write your teacher's name here. And you also want to write your table number, which is also on your table folder, sitting on your table. And that table number can be table plus the number, it can just be the number, or it can just be the letter T with the number. I just need to know when I give these back to you what table it goes to, so all 3 of those things need to be on here: your first and last name, your teacher's name, and your table number. Notice I wrote that really small in the corner of my paper because this is your one and only paper. You're using the front to draw your project on, and if you draw and erase and you just need to start over, you can flip this over, but make sure you move your name then to the other side of the paper. You want your name, teacher name, table number to be on the back of your project. So to begin drawing, I'm going to start with drawing just my letter M, the first letter of my first name. And I want to make sure that I'm drawing lightly. All day while you are writing in class, you are holding your pencil towards the tip of the pencil and you're pressing hard to make a mark on the paper. We need to teach ourselves to draw lighter for 2 reasons. 1, so that this can actually erase if we make a mistake, and 2, when we start adding colored pencil, we do not want to see our regular pencil line along with our colored pencil shading. So I've drawn lightly. A tip is to remind yourself, okay, press lightly, that's easy, but when we forget to do that, we continue to press dark. Another tip is to move your hand towards the middle of the pencil where you cannot press as hard on the tip of the pencil. So if you'd like to try that, you can. You don't have to if you don't want to. But if you hold the pencil down here, just keep reminding yourself, draw lightly, draw lightly. All right, now this is not enough though. I need to make sure that I have enough space to color and add texture, and that should be at least 2 fingers wide. So if you make a mark on your paper where 2 fingers are, you'll know that the rest of the letter stays wide enough. So this has to be a bubble letter. Well, Mrs. K, I don't know how to make a bubble letter. So I'm going to show you how. If you draw a shadow around this entire letter, so I'm going around the bottom and around the sides and the top, I can then take my eraser and get rid of that original pencil line of the letter M that I drew on my paper. And look, I drew lightly, so it's easy to erase. Now I have a bubble letter M, which I can fill with a texture. So now that I have my letter drawn nice and large, look at where it's placed on my paper. It's not touching the bottom for it to fall off the page, and it's not touching the top where it can fly away. I have enough space now to draw my background. I have a decision to make. Am I going to draw my background first because I really know that I want my letter to be underwater or in outer space or in a room? If you know what you want your background to be, then you can go into drawing your background, which I'm going to do now. I really want to draw underwater, so I'm going to draw where maybe the sand and the water would meet at the bottom of the ocean. Maybe I add some seaweed, hanging out back here. Maybe my letter is sitting on a rock. Maybe there's a piece of coral on that rock as well. And maybe there's a fish hanging out here behind my letter M. So I have this big fish. His tail maybe is going off the page. So now I have some of my background drawn. I need to pick a texture now for my letter. Now that I know my background's underwater, if I look at the texture page, I can see that some of these textures would work really well for an underwater letter, like scales, to be like a fish. Some people said pointy, maybe it's like a sea cucumber. Maybe it's fuzzy, looks kind of like a sea urchin. Maybe it's wood because it's a treasure chest that's at the bottom of the water. Maybe it's wavy because the light's reflecting to the water and making it wavy. So there's lots of different textures that can work here for my letter. It doesn't matter which texture I end up choosing, but there are some textures on this page that you need to pre-draw before colored pencil. There are 3. Fuzzy should have an X next to it, wavy should have an X next to it, and wood should have an X next to it. These 3 textures you do not need to pre-draw. So if I drew my background and I wanted my letter to be fuzzy, I would be done. I'm leaving my letter open. Fuzzy texture, wavy texture, wood texture are going to happen next week with the colored pencil. You do not need to pre-draw anything else if you're doing any of these 3 textures. If you're drawing brick, bumpy, pointy, scales, or soft, you do have some pre-drawing to do, and I'm going to show you how to do those now. So for brick, and I'm going to draw them all on here. It's going to look kind of silly, but I at least want to show you what they should look like because of the pre-drawing. So for brick, I'm going to draw some rows across the letter. Notice how wide those lines are apart from each other. I need them to be at least a finger wide, if not wider, because if I draw teeny tiny little bricks, you're coloring them in individually, and you'll be here forever coloring little tiny bricks. If they're bigger bricks, you'll be a lot happier because you'll have less of them to color. So I've separated them into rows, but I need to separate them vertically like individual bricks. And bricks are not rows and vertical lines. It's not a grid. I need to draw individual vertical lines alternating away from each other so it looks like bricks would be on an actual wall. That would be bricks. Next is bumpy. And bumpy kind of just looks like circles right now. Large circles, like the size of your thumbnail or bigger, should be these circles that are all over the letter. And it's going to just look like circles or bubbles, but when I show you the colored pencil video, I'll show you how to shade those circles to look like they're round bumps. So that would be bumpy. Next would be pointy. Pointy is like the letter V, but going in all different directions. So there's points all over your letter, in and out. You can erase then these lines that go through some of those points. It is not drawing a zigzag just around the outside edge of your letter. That's not enough. You need to have some points inside, outside, going all directions. Next is scales. You decide, are the scales going to go from top to bottom, left to right? Pick where you want them to go, and you're drawing like continuous hills. Notice how large those scales are, at least your thumbnail, if not bigger. Now, like a bug, you're gonna jump from the top of this hill to the top of that hill to the top of this one. So it looks like the scales are tucked behind each other. Continue to draw them large. Don't start making them smaller as you continue drawing. Large scales. Again, you're coloring them individually. You don't want to be here forever coloring tiny scales. And last is soft. If you want your letter to be soft, you're actually going to change the look, the outside edge of your letter. You're going to draw these big bumps going around the outside of your letter. And then eventually you're going to erase these lines that are inside so that your letter, the outside shape of your letter, is soft, kind of like a cloud. And then the colored pencil video is going to show you how to shade that to make it look like it's soft and round. So today you're drawing your letter, you're drawing your background, and if you choose a texture that has some pre-drawing, you're pre-drawing that texture on your paper. When you're done, at the end of class, your paper will go in the table folder. Texture papers, you'll make a pile. Somebody will be collecting those. Next week, I'll show you a video on colored pencil.